Hello, and welcome to the University of South Wales live stream event for fashion design. We're really pleased you can join us. My name's Steve Wright. I'm the course editor for fashion design at USW. The webinar today focuses on the topic of graduate journeys. I'll be speaking with Paige Leach, graduate of ours from 2019, about her journey from student to professional, working for the biggest luxury brand in the world. Please make sure you have the question window open on the right of your screen, and please remember, don't share any personal details in the live chat. We might not be able to answer every question, but we're really going to try. So let's get started. Okay, great. We've got our first question here from Lily. How did you get to work at Givenchy?
So for me, in my final year of uni, there is a competition that's launched with the British Fashion Council, and it is in collaboration with Givenchy. And I opted to do the competition because I was already extremely passionate about Givenchy. A lot of the work that I was doing for my dissertation in my final year was overlapping with lots of things that were happening with Givenchy past and present. And so for the competition, the brief was to design a capsule collection for the brand, and it had to be based upon a contemporary character that wasn't a celebrity. So for my dissertation, I was looking into an image series by Alexander McQueen and Nick Knight, featuring Amy Mullins, who is a Paralympian and athlete model. And so I used my interview that I did with Amy to form the design of the brief for Givenchy. I did a lot of 3D work for that brief, a lot of primary research, but for me, as I already kind of had a lot of kind of knowledge of the brand previously, it wasn't like I was starting from scratch. So I did quite a lot of research. They want you to look at research that's based on the heritage, but design a collection that's contemporary and fit in a modern audience. And so I started looking into the kind of historical codes of the house, the type of silhouettes and fabrics that they use, but using someone like Amy really fitted with what the house is doing at the time. The previous creative director was Chloe Keller, who was the first female creative director for Givenchy. So it made sense to use someone like Amy, who is a double amputee and a Paralympian, a female role model, to connect with the brand as the character. So for that collection, I called it Architect Decor, and it was basically the body architect, so building the body and constructing it in a way as if someone with a prosthetic would. And I did a lot of work on the stand and developing prints and kind of shapes that, for example, the collection could be worn by people with or without an amputation and make them feel powerful. And I think that's something which was not what they would have originally thought to do at Givenchy. So it was providing something different, but using the codes of the house. So when I submitted my portfolio, so it was required that you submit a digital portfolio, which for me was quite complicated because I work very tactile. So I was a bit, I struggled to kind of condense into a digital way, I guess, and submitted. But anyway, and I was shortlisted as 10 finalists for the competition, which meant that I needed to go to Somerset House in London and present my work, the collection and the research that I did. And arriving at Somerset House, then there was a boardroom, and each person went separately to present the work that they made. You didn't have to actually make a physical garment, but some people did bring their graduate collection and use that. I chose to make a different collection that was specifically for the brand. So when I arrived, they had this boardroom, and on one side of the table I sat, and on the other side of the table, directly opposite me, sat Chloe Keller, who was the creative director of Givenchy. Sat next to her was Sarah Marr, who is a talent find for the British Fashion Council and the critic for Vogue Runway. Also, there was Stefan, who is the Chief Product Officer for Givenchy, and the CEO, Caroline Rush, of the British Fashion Council. So there were a panel of really kind of knowledgeable industry professionals who were looking for something different and something that can contribute to Givenchy. The prize was a 6-month paid internship. So obviously this was really fueling me through the competition, because to graduate and progress into that environment would have been really exciting. So when I arrived, instead of it being quite a nervous presentation, I was quite lucky that throughout my course we have a lot of presentations, and it's preparing me to talk through my work. So I already had quite a lot of experience doing that. But the conversation I had with Claire and Sarah, it was really like on the same level. I was teaching them things as well that they might not have known. And I had a major obsession for Alexander McQueen, like many designers, I guess. So for me to kind of speak to them about things that they might not have known about and share experiences, we were having a conversation more than a kind of interrogation. And that really impressed them, I guess, my knowledge and research. I think more than anything, it was the research that impressed them. My technical skills weren't on a fantastic level. It was my 3D experimentation and my kind of ability to kind of push things, even though it's not maybe the right way to do it, but this is a new way to do it. It was quite exciting for them. And I think also it's what they were looking for now in terms of designers in the industry. I wasn't presenting a portfolio to them that they'd seen before. I guess it really stood out amongst the 10 finalists, and my portfolio was a lot more, it was personal, but it was making them think as well, I guess. So, and then after that, we have to go into a room where Claire announced who was going to win. And honestly, I never thought that I would have won the competition, but I did. And based on your skills, what you show in the competition, then they put you in a place within the brand that they feel would suit your strengths. And so because I'd done a lot of 3D experimentation and draping, they placed me within the 3D studio, and I worked there until December.
Great. So the question, we've got a bunch of questions rolling in. I think you've answered the question about what the competition was like, but maybe if you could just touch on a bit about how you felt, like how you felt when you won.
It was a bit overwhelming, I guess. It was a lot of competition, and being in the room with 10 students who were bringing quite strong work, and we all had a chance to meet each other and discuss it beforehand and afterwards. I guess coming from not such a massive school, it's quite exciting because you don't have expectations already that you're going to what you're going to do. And so I felt like almost you have this inferiority complex at first, but then when I won, it was a kind of realization to me that actually I can do it, and it doesn't matter if you're from Central St. Martin's or London College of Fashion, or it doesn't matter which school you're from. You know, if you have the passion and you have the knowledge of the brand, and you know, you have something different to give, then it's, you know, it's great for me. And actually this mantra that I live by now, it's kind of silly, but you believe that you cannot do something until you do it. And I think that's something you need to, I think as a fashion student, I think that's something really important. You feel maybe that going to Paris is like, you know, going from Cardiff to Paris, it's like, it's a big shock, it's scary. But actually at the moment, I wasn't really worrying too much about that, because the idea of going to Givenchy was exciting enough that, you know, everything else came quite simple after that.
So speaking of that kind of transition from Cardiff to Paris, quite a big one for some people. What was it like living in and working in such a kind of massively, you know, kind of important fashion city?
Well, the language barrier was a problem for me because I hadn't really had any time to learn French. I didn't really know I was going to go to Paris that quickly. So I learned basics in the short time I had, but in terms of like the logistics, finding somewhere to live, it's quite complicated because obviously in Paris there is a lot, like there are many different rules. But in terms of the fact that it was an internship, it was actually, it taught me a lot about the kind of ways of working in France in general, because they have a lot more regulation than my internships in London. And it taught me efficiency, but also kind of the work-life balance, because from fashion jobs I had at the UK, there is never really a turn-off point where you switch off at the end of the day and you go home. But in Paris, it's very much at the end of the day, at this time, you leave and you don't do any more work. So it really taught me kind of when you're there to be efficient and to be productive. And then at the end of the day, or when it is like the weekend, it's the weekend. And that's really pretty much the same for people I met outside of fashion as well. The kind of work-life balance, it's really different in that sense. but it was complicated in terms of setting up a bank account and things like this. But I was quite lucky that I used an app like Find a Room, which is probably not, I don't recommend. This is the best way to find a place. But I was lucky that I found a family that spoke English. They are from Brazil originally, but they were living way outside Paris. But it's all, I mean, it's all I could afford to live in Fontainebleau, which is like quite far, which meant the commute was really difficult. But if I didn't love the place I was going each day, then I think I would not have been able to deal with the commute. It was quite complicated. There is like one train and it's packed, and if you know anything about France, you know that they strike a lot. So it was complicated for me in terms of getting to work, and kind of the transportation is pretty much the same anywhere now. I mean, anywhere you go, it's pretty much the same. But I was lucky that with Givenchy, obviously they pay in half of your travel, and they give you in France, if you're working in a company, a lunch card, so they're paying for the kind of food and things like that, which is such a big difference from working in London and having to like live off rice and kind of not being able to manage to pay for transport. So there's massive differences, but it also, in terms of there are different people and you meet different people, you learn different things from them as well. Like I met a lot of friends working at Givenchy and from different parts. It's very kind of international in Paris, like I think a lot of cities now. And it was interesting to learn like what other students have done in their kind of courses and where they were going, and you know, we learned different things from each other. So yeah, that was great.
That's a massive change of life, a massive kind of adventure for you, very different you know, to the stuff that we're used to. Amelia's asking here, how did the course and academics prepare you for the competition, but also not just the kind of competitive element of it, but also the placement itself, you know, dealing with that kind of environment?
Yeah, so the course, I actually started the course not actually being able to sew, which I don't recommend. It's a good idea. I don't know, but for me, I started not having any fashion experience at all. So the course changes as fashion should, and I think that's a good thing about the course. But I started in 2015 and graduated in 2019. So you can imagine, like, fashion changed a lot in that time, and my perception of fashion changed, and what it means to be a fashion designer changed as well in that time. But the course adapted to the things that are happening around, which I feel like not a lot of fashion courses are doing. And in the industry at the moment, it's stuck in a little bit of a dinosaur era. But I think that the course really, after first year, you kind of get all your skills and kind of, you know, you'll learn the basic, how to sew, how to make research, how to present in a portfolio, how to kind of put your work together at the end. So you learn the kind of cycle. But then going through the second year, you learn the role of a designer. A fashion designer is you never just work alone. You don't ever just work kind of as one person in a team. And I think second year for me really helped me to kind of not only to figure out where I was going in terms of design and who I was as a designer, but it gave you a lot of freedom to work with other people. And I think that's something that the fashion course in USW has quite good, because it's not fashion school existing by itself. It's like in the atrium where you can collaborate with lots of different people. And I recommend doing that. That's one thing that I didn't make the most of at the beginning of my course until I went on my placement year. And you realize that fashion design is not just like the clothing itself and the kind of final product. There is a lot before and after that it's important to the team and working with other people as well. So after second year, I did a placement year, and I recommend this is a great way to learn kind of in the industry, your position, but also to see what type of job you would like to do once you graduate, because you might think you want to be a fashion designer, but actually if you work in the industry and you take up different jobs, then you see that it's quite different. So if you have the opportunity to do a placement year, I recommend don't just do design, because you already know that you want to be a designer. You should try different things as well. It's important to see like the logistics of the fashion industry. So then in final year, when I returned to uni, I had all these skills from the beginning of the course, but also when I returned in final year, I have skills from the placement year. So it's different skills that uni can teach you, because in uni you work on your own most of the time and you don't necessarily have a kind of understanding maybe of like what happens after the collection or these types of things. And working with other people into like working with people from different places, like globally, like learning different languages and kind of learning to communicate with different types of people. Also, it's important. And you learn lots of this in internships in terms of your technical specifications and how to translate the information for factories and all of these kinds of things. And then in final year, it's really kind of free fall for you to use all those skills, but you have a lot of support around you. And I think that's something that a lot of courses don't have, is a lot of support from different types of people. And I think that in your final year, you're never really just left alone. You have a lot of kind of critique and feedback, and also presentation work, which I mentioned before. It's something which I used to absolutely dread, is to stand up and talk about my work in front of people. But if you know your work and you know like what it is you're doing, then you don't have, I've learned you don't need to worry, because if you're really passionate about your work and you've really done the work yourself and you know kind of what you're trying to say, I think that's something that the course really prepares you for, because in the industry you'll be doing a lot of talking and you might not want to, but it's really important. And I think I wouldn't have been able to go to even present my work in front of Claire without that. And actually the feedback I had from Sarah Mauer actually at that event and at different events at the British Fashion Council was that my portfolio was what the industry needed. It wasn't a kind of, and I think this is something that the course at USW is good for, because it doesn't encourage you to be a kind of robot. It doesn't encourage you to kind of come out of the course kind of all the same, ready to go and work for the same type of brands. The second year really encouraged us to hone in on what was important to us and what kind of makes us emotional, what we feel is important to say in the industry. But also my portfolio, I guess in the way that the portfolio works is in fashion, brands tend to want to see specification drawings, flats, and they want to see kind of a pretty lineup, fabric swatches and everything to look really kind of aesthetically pleasing. And that's something which at the beginning of my course I felt was the role of a fashion designer. There's pretty books, but actually in the end, when I received feedback from leaders in the industry at the moment, they are saying that my portfolio stood out because it didn't do that. And in terms of where the course of advanced, depending on kind of what was happening around it, I think that's something that's really kind of good for the course. That it taught me to put my portfolio in a way that was saying something about me, and as me as a designer, but not kind of overwriting all the essential skills that you need. Obviously, you need to be able to do technical drawings. You need to be able to have a commercial portfolio, but in a way that isn't, you need to have someone to look through your portfolio and not just move to the next one and look through it and then move to the next one. You need to have someone stop and say, oh, that's interesting. Why did you do that? And that's, for me, what the feedback I got from lots of people, especially at Graduate Fashion Week. I think my portfolio, in a way, shock, but that's something which the industry needs. And I don't think they know they need that right now. But I guess for me, it's important to remain kind of integral in your work. And the course encourages that. So I think, yeah.
Wonderful. I mean, that for me as the course editor, that's wonderful to hear, and I think that's a really important thing that sets us apart from a lot of other courses, is that it's all about student individuality and figuring out where you sit. But speaking of that, I'm going to jump a few questions and go to B's written a question here about what drives you as a designer. So talking about the change in the industry and how you stood out from other applicants for the competition, what is it that drives you as a designer?
For me, I was driven to fashion for like its expressive nature and kind of how it can be performative. But essentially, for a designer, you have so much scope to say things that and kind of have an impact with things that you can't really do in lots of different disciplines. I think that you have the opportunity to not only express personal issues, which I think a lot of the time people are drawn towards fashion because they want to express something that they maybe can't say with words. And that's, for me, something which really interests me in fashion, this kind of way to make statements with clothes that you can't really do with with writing. But also fashion is really powerful in terms of identity and how we communicate to other people. So how your consumer will communicate, how it will make them feel, how it can liberate them, but also how it can make them feel not so good if it's not that well designed, or in terms of making them stand out or making them fit in. And, you know, you can reach lots of different people. Fashion isn't just what, you know, it's kind of this product for elite people to walk around with a magazine and coffee, and you know, it's not, fashion is not at all like this. Fashion is powerful in terms of what it can do, so, and in terms of design in general too. So for me, the thing that draws me towards design is the ability to kind of make a statement, whereas, you know, whereas I might not want to be on a stage or such, and kind of make a statement personally. Fashion can do that for you. So for me.
Wonderful. Okay, we've got a few here. These are more personal ones, so I might actually wrap these two up. So we've got Mari and James, and Mari's asking what it was like to move to Paris from South Wales, and then James is asking like a really big philosophical question: what did you learn about fashion, life, yourself, and yourself throughout the journey on the course? So maybe like you could talk about 2015 to 2020, like all that kind of stuff.
I guess when I started the course, my idea of fashion, I'll be honest, it was different, because fashion was different then. Maybe I wasn't aware of the issues as well that are happening in the industry. But I came from Cambran, so it's a very kind of, nothing is really happening here in terms of fashion, and I didn't have any fashion education. There wasn't really any museums or kind of creative spaces here. So obviously I'm coming into fashion quite kind of informed. But I knew this kind of hard work kind of was really essential to fashion. And I had that, and I had a passion in fashion, although I didn't understand essentially everything to do with it. But 2015, I guess, when I started the course, I was in a very different space. And I think that's the same for any degree. In 4 years, I did a placement year, so it was 4 years, but 3 to 4 years, you grow a lot. And I grew a lot and found out things about myself that I may not know. But in terms of fashion, I think that's it's exciting, because you have the scope to kind of research and understand lots of different things. Fashion isn't just clothing, you know, it's culture and it's communication, and it can be, you know, different kind of environmental issues. Lots of different things come into fashion. It's not just clothes. So for me, I learned a lot about well, the world and other people as well. You know, you meet different people on the course. I made a lot of friends who were international. So, you know, I learned a lot of things that I didn't know about how it is for them at home, and they learned a lot about my experience as well. But I came from an A-level, so I did psychology and art and business. So they are quite strange to come into fashion. So I try to really use psychology in fashion where I can, and I think I have a tendency to overanalyze. But I did use this as a kind of negative thing at the beginning. I thought, well, maybe it's not such a good thing, but actually I've used that as a strength instead. So I've flipped it, and instead I've used it to kind of, you know, ask questions, why I do it like that, because I didn't really understand fashion. So it was quite great, because I have the opportunity to ask from the beginning why, you know, why we buy so much of this, why we do it in this way, you know, why they have this type of sale, what does it do, what does it achieve, all these different kinds of things. And in second year, I did a project that was about oniomania, which is a consumption addiction. And it was, I guess, quite a dark way to interpret my experience throughout kind of fast fashion industry. But then I took this project to apply for an internship at Matalan, which was not my best decision. But for me, I think doing things like that, it taught me a lot, I guess, about my values are. And I think the course is good for that, especially understanding what you want to say. And kind of, you don't necessarily have to use fashion in, you know, the way that it's been used already. And that, you know, as a designer, you're designing, and it's up to you what you are going to do. So in terms of going from Wales to Paris, it was very different. There is, in the fashion industry, a huge attainment gap. It's elitist even now. What we've seen the last few months, not only with COVID, but with the Black Lives Matter. It's not everything, I guess, the way that brands respond and the way that actually is behind the scenes. It frustrates me quite a lot. Although I got quite a lot of experience prior, I'm still unemployed, and I don't know whether it's because of where I come from, because I don't have kind of the access to the finances that maybe some other fashion students do. But in terms of coming from the background that I come from, I've realized that instead of trying to compete with people who are like quite, I don't know how to put it, elite, or I guess, I don't know how to put it, but like that. I guess I've learned that coming from where I come from makes me who I am, and all the work I've done, I think it's a part of me is in that. So I believe that, you know, you should never, I had this feeling after I graduated that I need to get away, I need to go to a big city, I need to work for a big designer. But actually, I think the last 5 to 7 months, coming home and actually being grounded again, it's, I think as a designer, you need to always remember that where you come from, it's who you are, and your work will always come back to that. And so in terms of going to Paris, it was difficult for me to kind of fit in at times. And I tried a lot of the time to change who I was. You know, I started to dress differently because I thought I had to. I started to, you know, talk differently. And, you know, then after a while, I lost kind of the motivation to do a lot of creative projects that I used to do. And so I'm lucky that actually, not really lucky, but to graduate into the year that all of this pandemic happened, I think it's been almost a blessing because I've had a lot of time to stop and think. And I think that's actually something which we all needed to do. But in terms of like Paris and Cardiff, there's not really, there is difference in terms of the way, obviously the economics and the way the country's running, but you can be a designer in any country in the world if you have the drive to do it. It does not matter like where you're coming from, what school you're going to, who your parents are, how much money you have. Really, it's about like your passion and drive and your vision, and that's something which I think in Paris especially, a lot of the students are taught quite technical and quite specific ways of doing things. But I came to Givenchy quite kind of raw, and you know, we'll experiment. I'll put that there and I'll put that there. And a lot of the time they said, no, it's too conceptual. You need to make it like, you know, more ready to wear, because I worked between ready to wear and haute couture. And so for me, working on ready to wear was actually difficult at first to control my ways of working, because coming from like my graduate collection was quite striking, I guess. It's been called striking, I don't know. But it was quite it wasn't really necessarily ready to wear, and I hadn't done ready to wear before. So there was something for me that was complicated, but it really helped me to control my design process. And in Paris especially, there's a lot of minimalist design, that things are well made, but you know, they are still, you still have to make them different. So for me that was quite challenging, but it taught me how to control my design process, because I think a lot of the time when I was studying in Cardiff, I made a lot of noise with my work to kind of get exposure and to get out. But then in Paris it was about using that still but kind of learning how to control it as well. So yeah, that's
Wow, a lot of takeaways there, Paige, which is really good to hear. Okay, what are we looking at here for our questions? Amy's asking, what do you look for in a fashion house that makes you want to work there?
Do they mean in terms of Givenchy? I don't.
Well, I imagine that might be about like maybe their values or the skills you're going to learn. Maybe talk a little bit about, because the next question's asking, from Nika, what did you think was the best takeaway of placement year? So maybe if you could focus maybe on your placement year and how you chose the different companies that you chose, for what reasons?
So for me, as I was never really good at sewing and kind of construction in the beginning of my course, I really wanted in my placement year to develop that. So I started my first internship and I was obviously, I think in second year or first year, I can't remember, you kind of decide, you can be men's wear or women's wear design or neither. but I decided that somewhere there I wanted to be a women's wear designer. So I started looking for brands that, you know, studio placements where I would be learning kind of cutting techniques and these sorts of things. I didn't even know there was correct ways to pin fabric and cut fabric and, you know, lay plans in the way that they don't want to waste absolutely any fabric because it's too expensive for their budgets and these types of things. I learned, I got told off for pinning things quite incorrectly in the beginning. And then, so that's quite, even just little things like that, that first internship really helped me to learn that. In terms of why I chose that, I don't know really why I chose this brand. I think it was Emilia de la Morena, and at the time they were doing lots of like big like ruffles and I don't know, for me it was attractive, I guess. But I was only there for 1 week. It was for the fashion week, like the run up when they really need a lot of interns to help them get the samples out. And it was unpaid, obviously. And then I moved then to Emilia Wickstead, which was a product development internship. So that was interesting for me because I didn't know the role product development. I didn't know what it entailed. I didn't know that, you know, about the journey of a product. So for me, it was I wanted to do this to understand the kind of what happens in uni. You learn how to do technical packs and things like that. But what happens after that? You know, if you are actually a company, like send into factories and get in different samples back, so you get an SMS, PPS, and all of these different samples that then, you know, in terms of collecting like all the items that you need to go into the packs to be sent to factories, delivering them to factories, and kind of seeing how that works, but also realizing that if there is a kind of delay in design, then there's a delay in product development, and there's a delay in production, and then there's a delay in press, and so it's like it's almost teaching really to meet really harsh deadlines so that everything can run smoothly for everyone in the team. At the time, I chose Emilia Wickstead because it was luxury women's wear, and they were working with lots of different fabrics that I weren't familiar with. And so this is also something that I spoke about in the Givenchy presentation, was that my understanding of fabrics, they've really developed, because if someone were to ask me to go and get black CDC, I would have just looked at them like, I don't know what it is, how it looks. So like really being able to tell what fabric is from the feel of it, and, you know, being able to source fabrics and trims and things like that. It really helped me as well for my graduate collection, because you learn about different suppliers in London, and you learn, you know, where to get the best trims and kind of the best prices and things like that. I was there for 7 months. But obviously in London, it's extremely difficult to be an intern if you are unpaid. So that's something that I had to stop my internship, and I worked then for a while in a retail store, which wasn't really, I wouldn't have said that would have been my best choice, because actually working there made me realize that that kind of line of fashion is something that I couldn't do for a living. I couldn't work in a high street retailer in terms of design. Because the way things were done, it just, for me, I was the person in the store to constantly put things with a faulty label. And I got very told off for that, because you're not supposed to really do too much of that. But for me, nothing really seemed that it was correctly put together, because as I was learning from my internships, I then become a lot more critical of things, I guess, and don't know whether that's a good thing, but maybe I was overly critical, and it's actually it makes things a little complicated. Then after this, I was working in the store, and also I applied for an internship at Mary Katranzu, because her work is really kind of artistic and conceptual, but also she's doing a lot of different prints, and she actually was a BF, British Fashion Council New Gen, I think a few not so long before. So she was really kind of current, and her work was something that I admired for a long time, and she's doing lots of prints and kind of mirroring and things like this. And so I applied there in production, because at working at Emilia Wickstead, there's obviously production that follows, and I'd been working a lot in the factories and taking things to factories, but I wanted to understand this role a bit more, kind of the kind of distribution after product development. But I ended up working in product development as well, because I was managing the other interns that weren't really managing their jobs so well there. So that was a good opportunity to learn kind of leadership skills as well. But I also had already knowledge, so on that level I was kind of more advanced at Mary's. And then an internship came up at Gareth Pugh, which Gareth Pugh is one of my favorite designers of all time. So me also, I was doing my dissertation research with Nick Knight at the time. I was attending a lot of events with Nick Knight, and I attended a lot of Saraband events. And there was Gareth Pugh had an exhibition or installation at Selfridges at the time, so I attended this, and I was really kind of absorbed in this kind of avant-garde London design phase, and I think that's something that really kind of shaped my need and kind of desire to study fashion in the beginning. So when this studio internship came at Gareth Pugh, I applied, and I didn't think at all I would get in, because I had seen Gareth Pugh as like on the equivalent level as Alexander McQueen, or somebody extremely innovative and significant. It's like working for your favorite celebrity, it's someone who you really admire. But I really understood his work and connected with his work, and I felt like that's the way my work was going. After second year, I really kind of started to find myself in this kind of I started to understand the kind of consumer I wanted to target, and I felt like it's quite similar to Gareth. So I took I applied and didn't get a response. So then I'm quite inquisitive, and I do lots of research, finding out who works for who. And at the time, I was reading a lot of books about McQueen, Nick Knight, Gareth Pugh. So I started to learn the names of different people working in different places in London, and I started to send some emails to the press of Gareth Pugh and asking why I've not received a response. Could you please send my portfolio? And it was actually the best decision to do, because the next day I was at Mary Katranzu, and I took all of my things off my desk, and they said, "Where are you going?" I said, "I'm going to Gareth Pugh." And they were like, "You cannot just leave. We won't be able to cope without you. It was really busy." And I said, "I'm so sorry, but you need to understand, like, this is better for me." It was a studio internship, and there they have very small team. So it was a few interns, and the studio manager, and Gareth and Carson. So Carson is Gareth's partner, and together it's a small team. But for me, it worked. I learned a lot more from that than I learned from the other internships in bigger companies where you do one specific role, because here you kind of learn in the kind of logistics. But if they needed fabric, you get it, but then you come back and you're really hands-on. It was like handcrafted, but to a like exquisite level. I remember my first day there. The first thing I did was there was this red human hair, and I was making tassels from this, so measuring it exactly, cutting it and gluing it. And there was another intern that was also doing this with me, but it was really fun to do something like that. But that's something which I guess someone can be quite grossed out by or shocked by, but for me it was like, this is Gareth Pugh, I will do anything. For me it was really exciting, and I worked there until the show, and it was really, for me, after the show they have an event which was Vogue Ball in kind of tribute to Judy Blame. So this was a kind of where I really saw the kind of power of fashion, not just to kind of express and for the catwalk, but kind of the different people that came to that event, the kind of way that they felt they kind of express themselves, and how fashion can essentially help them to kind of become a different person. And kind of he have almost built a community around him of designers who are kind of quite political. I attended with them a march with it was when Donald Trump, I think, came to London, and we made by hand these giant signs. We had 10 signs, and we were asking people to help us like carry them. And for me, it was like the experience of fashion that I needed, because in fashion, you see this kind of system of a hierarchy that's like the designer is at the top, and you mustn't, you don't really get to see them. At my other internships, I rarely got to really work with the designer or see the designer. And this quite like this in Paris, the designer is on the top floor of the building, and you're on the bottom floor of the building. If you're lucky, you're on the top. It's very rare. So, it's... For me at Gareth, it wasn't like that. It showed that, you never really forget where you come from, and there's authenticity and kind of integrity in what he does. and it's all kind of personal for him, but not in the way that obviously there is two parts of the brand. There was the kind of diffusion line, which is the commercial part of the brand that he's selling, and then there is the kind of conceptual, like artistic pieces that he's working on for celebrities. On this internship, I also got to work on a collection for Christina Aguilera's Xtina tour, the US, I think it was, the American leg of the tour, the first leg of her tour, where I was hand carving like letters for her jackets and working on the giant skirt that she wore. So for me, that was, I think, really exciting, because we had such a small studio and we were all kind of there working together, coming together on a piece, whether you're from Central St. Martin's or, USW, we were all kind of on the same level there. And it's kind of like you leave your kind of attitude at the door and you come in and you are part of kind of a team who's really, for me, it was my best experience in the industry to date. And I think a lot of that really informed my brand as well going forward. So that was my last internship for Givenchy. So I didn't work for a house in Paris. Okay.
Do we have time for one more question, I think? Okay. So Nika is asking, maybe it's a two-part question. I'm sneaking another couple in there. But Nika's asking, is there anything you wish you knew before going on placement? But then our last question is, what are your career plans going forward? What has the internship taught you about fashion, and what's kind of path you want to take? So maybe like the thing you need, if you could tell anyone who's in second year on a fashion course, like something before going on placement, what is that?
I don't know. I think for me, in placement year, I like I said before, it's important to figure out what it is you want to improve at. If you're really good at something, don't spend a year doing it, because it's about learning. I mean, I'm not saying don't do it, but if you don't know about production, or you don't know about even PR, if you're interested in this, or other things that happen other than design, then really try, and even if it's for 2 weeks, have a go at something else. Or even if you're in a company doing design, ask if you can learn from another department. That's really important. But one thing that I didn't realize, I guess, about the industry is it's incredibly hard to get a job. It's like there are millions and millions and millions of students, and there are 2 jobs, so it's quite complicated in the sense. Post kind of graduating, you really need to stand out. So your work really needs to kind of be personal to you. I think that's something which, especially if you're doing internships, you're going into companies where they don't have really much prior expectation of you, because they might not have had anyone there from your school before. And so they only learn about you from your work ethic and kind of your portfolio and what you're saying. So for that sense. And the second question was, what's my plan?
Yep.
So I came back home after I was in France for lockdown. So now I'm going to start. Well, I've been working actually on the USW Entrepreneurship Summer School, which is really helpful. And I think because you have access to this, I recommend you kind of have to take the opportunity to look into it, because you have this expectation if you graduate, you have to work for someone else, but it's not necessarily the case. And my internships really kind of give me so many skills that, it would be a waste not to use them all in kind of creating and developing my brand here in Wales. But a lot of the frustrations I have within the industry, instead of just being frustrated by them, I'm trying to make a little bit of a difference with what I do next. So I'm going to do an MA, a Design Innovation at USW, but also I'm working on developing my brand in a space where I can give opportunities to young people who are in Wales who don't have the kind of maybe finance or kind of ability to travel and work in London, or even if they cannot afford to go to university for some reason, they are in a difficult situation. I want to give something back in that sense. So that's what I've been working on this summer, developing that. So hopefully I can do something, because with learning all the things that happen in the industry, you don't just learn positive things, you also learn sometimes things might not be working the best way. Although maybe they are on the front and what you see in the kind of media, it looks great, but behind that there are a lot of issues that I want to address, because it's important, I think, for me and all of my work to do that. So that's what I'm hoping to do now.
So nothing big, just changing the whole world.
I don't think it's possible, but I hope that I can try at least, because if you're just frustrated by things and you don't do anything about it, I think that just doesn't make me very much of a designer at all. So
thank you so much, Paige. That was really, really wonderful, and I think you're really honest and open, and that's a really important thing. But unfortunately, that's all we have time for today. I hope everyone watching has found this event useful and we were able to answer any of your questions. You can find more information on our online open days by contacting our inquiries team through our live chat on our website. Thank you so much for joining us, and we hope to see you at the University of South Wales soon. Thank you very much.